Welcome to episode 36 of the G2 on 5G. It's the latest inside scoop on everything 5G. We cover 6 topics in about 15 minutes, and it's brought to you by More Insights and Strategy. I'm Will Townsend, coming to you from Kansas City, Missouri this week, and joining me again is fellow analyst Anshel Sag. Let's get started with my first topic. And it's around OnGo Wireless and the CBRS Alliance. So there was an announcement this week that the CBRS Alliance is actually rebranding itself the OnGo Alliance. The reason why it's doing that is it's going to extend all of its learnings on a global basis. So if you've been following CBRS or Citizens Band Radio Service, they have been instrumental in driving the whole notion of shared spectrum with that repurposed naval spectrum. And so they've been at this for quite a while. I've covered them. We've talked about them in prior podcasts, also written about them on Forbes as well. And so they're going to extend those learnings on a global basis. That's part of the rebranding. And what does that mean for the acceleration of private networking? I think it's only goodness, because they're going to bring a lot of learnings from the US. It's no secret that, other parts of the world, when you look at Europe and you look at Asia, they're looking at similar scenarios to provide, broader access of licensed spectrum to entities beyond carriers. And so I think this is a super positive thing. So I'd love to get your thoughts on it as well.
I think it's positive, but I think it's more of a marketing thing than anything else.
Interesting.
I think them going international is a bigger deal than the branding of it. But I think it does make it easier for people to recognize a similar, potentially global marketing name for the technology.
Mm-hmm. I just think, they are going to bring a lot of learning. So I get what you're saying. I think, countries can figure this out on their own, but this stuff is quite difficult. And it's no secret that because the CBRS Alliance, which is, now OnGo Wireless, had to learn to work with government entities and like multiple government entities, when you think about the DoD and you think about the FCC, that there were a lot of learnings there that can be shared with other parts of the world. So I think it's going to help accelerate things. I think it's a positive, thing that's happened here, and we'll keep our eyes on it and see how things develop. But let's move to your first topic this week. And Ookla released their findings, and AT&T is making a claim, right?
Yeah. So Ookla, parent company of SpeedTest.net, which is the app that most people use to test the speed of their internet connection, either be it at home or on their phones, came out with an updated version of their SpeedTest Global Index, and they found that AT&T was the fastest network combined for both 4G and 5G. And part of how they calculate this is by an aggregate score. It is not a megabits per second number. They do actually measure speeds. So they found that at AT&T that they had speeds upwards of 67 megabits per second on average in December. Mm-hmm. But what that does is it actually generates a score. And the score was that AT&T had a speed test score of 75.59, which combines 90% of download and 10% of upload. So mm-hmm. It's kind of like a weighted score. And what it's saying is they weight download as 90% of the score and upload as 10%, which may not necessarily agree with, but that's how they're doing it, which can actually affect what those end results look like in terms of who's fastest. But what's interesting is AT&T took first place, with T-Mobile taking second, and Sprint, now part of T-Mobile, taking third, and Verizon taking fourth. And the reason why this is a big deal is because Verizon slipped quite a bit because of their deployment of their new 5G low band using DSS, which mm-hmm. a lot of people have reported has not been very fast and has actually been slower than 4G, which severely hurt their score. And AT&T has been, kind of came out of the gate pretty quick. I recall getting 200 to 300 megabits per second on their initial rollout. And it seems like they've been able to maintain those top end speeds while also improving their low end speeds even more. And it seems like this has kind of been what's pushed them into this #1 spot as far as Ookla is concerned. But the reality is their coverage is still not as good as T-Mobile's.
Yeah.
And their peak speeds, in theory, are as good as AT&T, or as good as Verizon's, because they also have millimeter wave, but it's in very few places. And Verizon kind of owns millimeter wave as far as coverage and availability, but that's still less than 1% nationwide coverage. So it's going to be interesting to see over the course of this year who makes performance claims, coverage claims, and see who really comes out on top, because I think that's going to be changing over the course of this year as more of the 5G networks mature.
Yeah, I agree. And there's so many moving parts to this, right? The use of DSS. Are we talking low band, mid band, or millimeter wave? And it seems like they're, the pole position changes almost on a quarterly basis. And certainly I expect, AT&T and, Verizon kind of exiting that C-band auction that we've talked about on a couple previous podcasts, to start deploying those assets. But that'll take time, obviously, and that's going to affect overall speed ratings and that sort of thing. So it seems like that there's a different winner every quarter, but hey, it's a barometer, right? And so something that we'll keep our eyes on. So let me move to my second topic this week. And Nokia and China Mobile conducted a trial applying artificial intelligence to China Mobile's radio access network. And what China Mobile is branding is something called, I'm going to read it here, iWireless Intelligent and Simplicity 5G Network concept. And the way that I interpret that is they're just looking for ways to better optimize the radio access network part of the deployment. That's where the rubber really meets the road, talking about upload and download speeds that we were discussing earlier. One of the stats that was quoted, and forgive me for reading off my smartphone here, but this was done in Shanghai. It said the trial confirmed that the traffic prediction accuracy exceeded 90%. They trialed this in a live 5G network. And if you think about that, that's incredible when you start talking about tactile operations, when you start talking about telemetry for autonomous driving and that sort of thing. So, from my perspective, it is a trial. They use the live network, but the results are very promising. What are your thoughts?
I haven't really seen much about that in terms of implementing AI with the RAN. But it sounds like it's something that's kind of a fledgling technology. And it'll be interesting to see how that actually gets implemented in a commercial network.
Yeah, it will. We'll keep our eyes peeled, and we'll report back as things develop there. Why don't we move to your second topic this week? And I know, didn't you attend a MediaTek analyst event? I think you've got some news to share there.
Yeah, so this week we actually got two announcements for chipsets for 5G devices. The first one was actually a kind of small announcement, which was the Snapdragon 870 announcement, which
from Qualcomm,
from Qualcomm, and that's a kind of a refresh of the 865 Plus, which is really designed to give OEMs some flexibility in what they decide to use, whether it's a Snapdragon 888, which has 5G built in with the Snapdragon X60 modem, or the 870, which is going to be with an X55. So that's kind of a ho-hum one. The big one was really coming from MediaTek, where they announced the Dimensity 1100 and 1200. Those are not actually chips that have 5G modems built in. They will leverage MediaTek's modems, which currently is an M70, and that's going to be a two-chip solution. But both of those chipsets, I would fully expect to kind of be what's the lead 5G chipset for MediaTek and their partners. And there's been a lot of talk about how MediaTek is gaining momentum in terms of market share, and that they're #1 in terms of market share against Qualcomm, and they've been the ones who have actually managed to take advantage of the Huawei situation with some of their supply constraints and having issues with getting enough devices out there. So it seems like MediaTek has really taken the biggest advantage of the current situation because Qualcomm can't supply Huawei, and a lot of MediaTek's partners are competitors to Huawei, and I think they're the ones who really benefited from the situation.
Yeah, so tremendous upside for MediaTek. Let me ask you this because you're very knowledgeable on this point. Do you feel like MediaTek still has the same sort of breadth and depth that Qualcomm has? I mean, you've talked about Qualcomm's capabilities to supply the very high-end, mid-range, and low-end handsets. Do you see MediaTek's roadmap sort of marrying up to that, or are they just kind of opportunistically taking some share because of the China versus U.S. Debate?
Well, I think they wouldn't have been able to take advantage of the situation if they didn't have chips like the Dimensity 1000 last year, which came pretty close to competing with Qualcomm. And these new 1100 and 1200 chips are designed to compete with the Snapdragon 888. However, I'm not really sure they will actually be able to beat it in terms of performance on any measurement, what be it 5G, CPU, GPU. I think it'll come close, but I don't think it will be the leader necessarily. So it basically has to be the chipset, which has kind of been MediaTek's play, is it's a value. You get a lot of performance for the dollar, but you might not necessarily get the best performance. And that won't necessarily bode well for them at the very high end, but it will do well for them in the mid-range, which is a very popular category today. I think we're going to see Qualcomm trying to be competitive with the Dimensity 1100 and 1200 chipsets, when we'll probably see products coming soon that will be very close in terms of price performance and offer something similar. But it's getting competitive, and it's a good thing to see.
Yeah, no, competition, spurs innovation, and it keeps companies honest with pricing. So I think it's definitely good. I mean, AMD has proven that with their competition with Intel. Let's move to my third topic this week, and I want to talk about Verizon. They announced a partnership with Unity. This is an area that you cover, right? Unity is basically the platform that's used for AR and VR and mixed reality development. And the relationship really further extends what Verizon's really been focused on lately, which is mobile edge compute. There have been a flurry of announcements. We've covered some of these on prior podcasts, but Verizon is really doubling down, and you're starting to see the same thing from other operators as well on mobile edge computing. So what does this mean for consumer and enterprise 5G services? So it's no secret that mobile edge computing can supercharge the capability of these new 5G networks. Certainly from a consumer perspective, mobile gaming, that's obvious low-hanging fruit. But I've spoken to really compelling use cases in the enterprise that can leverage mixed reality, such as augmented field service and that sort of thing, and being able to overlay schematics and that sort of thing when field technicians are actually making repairs, to speed repairs and that sort of thing. And that's only one application, but I think this is a further step in the right direction, marrying mixed reality with mobile edge computing to sort of supercharge these 5G use cases. So curious to hear your thoughts as well on it.
Well, I have actually written a paper for Unity before on some topics, but the reality is Unity is a very popular game engine. I don't even call it I call it a world engine now. But so many applications developers use Unity on a daily basis that they're very familiar with the Unity platform. And I think that Unity's ease of use is ultimately what will be good for Verizon's, because application developers that are familiar with Unity will already be in that environment and will be able to deploy their applications within Unity's ecosystem very easily for mobile edge compute. And so that they'll be able to think about their applications, not just how it runs on the device or how it runs in the cloud, but also how it runs on mobile edge compute. So I think it's a good thing, because this is going to make mobile edge compute applications easier to develop for. And I think that's really the big deal, because right now it's still very trial and error when it comes to building these applications for mobile edge compute. And I think having Unity partner with Verizon will be a good thing, because you're going to need the applications to actually utilize a mobile edge compute for it to be worth anything. And Unity is a big opportunity for that. And the only other company I can think of that would be a similar impact would be somebody like Epic Games. But there's pretty much two players in town when it comes to these game engines, if you call them that anymore, because so many movies, TV shows, like professional applications are now leveraging these game engines to make a virtual version of the real world.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, and I have a friend, you know, that works for a, you know, a game development company as well, and their applications for the military, right?
Yep.
You know, so I mean, the applications are numerous. So when people think of a gaming engine, you know, don't think of Pokemon Go. You know, the extensibility of it is quite impressive, and you know, and from my perspective, and I think you mentioned this already, this will really help accelerate the delivery of new 5G services, and it's gonna you know, drive innovation. So I think it's pretty exciting. I think it's something that we'll definitely keep our eyes and you know, ears open to, and report back as things develop. Let's move to your third and final topic this week, and you want to talk about a U.S. government initiative around 5G.
Yeah, so it's a multi-effort. Well, first of all, it's a Department of Commerce effort, and it's interesting because it was published this week, 19th, which means it's basically the last days of the Trump administration.
Yeah.
So the one thing is, I'm not really sure how much of this will be implemented. You know, there's some things that will carry over, but there will be some things that do not. So we don't even know whether or not this approach to 5G infrastructure will be adopted. It's a pretty lengthy document. It goes about 40 pages. And really there's like, I think there's 4 key lines of effort that they're focused on, which are to facilitate domestic 5G rollout, assess risks and identify core security principles of 5G infrastructure, address risks to U.S. economic and national security during the development and deployment of 5G infrastructure worldwide, which is an important key, and to promote the responsible global development and deployment of 5G, which means that this is about not only how we roll out 5G in the US, but also how our allies do it and what those risks could mean to us economically and for security reasons. And it calls out a lot of technologies like RAN, and there's tons of different organizations that have been referenced in it, literally a laundry list of them. But it's interesting because it takes into account DARPA, DHS, DOD, DOE, the FBI, the FCC, FDA. So this is a very comprehensive document. There's way too much to cover in a period of a couple minutes here, but I would recommend that you go out to the ntia.gov website and check it, and we'll include the link in the description for our video. But basically it kind of talks about all the different things that I think are necessary to make 5G rollout secure and safe. And it doesn't feel political by any means, so it shouldn't be politicized at all. It seems very reasonable in what it wants to accomplish. And it kind of just goes through and mentions which agencies should be responsible for what components. And it seems like a pretty serious document, and it'll be interesting to see whether they carry this forward or build upon it, or amend it with the new administration in charge.
Yeah, well, it's no secret, you know, Chairman Pai has stepped down with the Trump administration, having exited. Jessica Rosenworcel, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, is the new interim FCC chief. But hey, buddy, I'm curious, like, why the Department of Commerce and not the FCC?
So the Commerce is because the Department of Commerce has an agency beneath it called the National Telecommunications and Information Administration.
NTIA, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and NTIA is the one who actually drafted this document called the National Strategy to Secure 5G Plan. So this is an actual plan. This is not like a draft. This is an actual plan. So this is the policy, or at least the policies that are going to drive decision-making going forward, unless somebody goes through it from new administration and decides that it's no longer necessary. But this is technically under the purview of the Department of Commerce, because if you think about it, it makes sense. 5G will essentially be a huge driving force for the economy moving
Oh,
forward.
sure.
And
Yeah,
it'll be
yeah.
extremely important to maintain its security and viability for the economy to not be disrupted.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. We've both talked about how 5G will certainly have a dramatic effect on GDP in a positive way. But I learned something new today. The NTIA is under the Department of Commerce, so should maybe get educated a little bit more about how these things kind of line up underneath themselves. But I agree with you on the surface. Doesn't seem political to me. It seems like it's a very sensible plan, very thought out, very thorough, a lot of time spent. Certainly, the Trump administration was very supportive of accelerating 5G. There were other plans in the past. There was the fast plan to 5G, and I think this is just sort of a continuation of that. So it'll be interesting to see how the incoming administration picks up the 5G ball and rolls with it. So, but hey, man, another great episode this week. Why don't you take us home?
Absolutely. We hope our viewers and listeners found this week's topics interesting. If anyone out there would like to provide insight on a specific 5G topic for us to cover on a future podcast, please reach out to us on social media. Will is at Willtown Tech, and I'm at Anshel Sog. We hope you have a great weekend, and please tune in again next week.